In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. I know it's a little bit crowded, so if you're able to kind of just squeeze in to make room for people who are coming in. So I thought today would be a good day to talk about rockets. And I'll tell you why, because good stories always start off with, well, you don't need to be a rocket scientist. Well, today we need to be rocket scientists. So let's talk about rockets. I like rockets. If you look at a rocket, and I should have had a picture up of a rocket, but you have the white ship on top, and then you have the big cone-like rocket, and then two other rockets on the side. And thankfully, Google allows you to become an expert in just 15 minutes, so the big fuel tanks on the sides, they carry tons of fuel. And they say about a rocket uses nearly 90% of the fuel that it carries, the tons and tons of fuel that it carries, it uses 90% of the fuel in the first 15 minutes of flight. It uses 90% of the fuel in the first 15 minutes of its launch. And then they dump it. I don't know what happens to them. I didn't read that, but they dump them. So now we just have the white ship that goes off into space. So rocket scientists, they see something. They see, in their mind and in their heart, that space is where they want to get to. They have a picture of where they want to go. They have a picture of what they want to discover. And what they start to do is they start to account for the opposition. What they start to account for is gravity. What they start to account for is the force of the atmosphere, breaking through the atmospheres and the different atmospheres. What they account for is orbiting in space. And what they do is they spend a lot of time in school, a lot of time with their fellow rocket scientists, crunching numbers, figuring out how much fuel we need to pack in the ship based on how much cargo we're taking and how much we expect to bring back. They do all these calculations, mostly for the first 15 minutes of launch. It's just like, man, months and months, who knows how long of all these calculations, and then use it up in 15 minutes. Some might say, well, it doesn't make sense. Why spend all that time for 15 minutes? But what they see in their mind and in their heart is the end point. They see space. They see that this destination is worth getting to. They see that this destination is worth getting to. And so they plan. And they account for oppositions, they account for forces, and they account for gravity, the ozone, atmosphere, and all these things. So I want us to hold on to that, and let's look at today's gospel, which comes from Luke chapter 5, 27 through 39. And as we see, Jesus is walking through, and he walks by the tax office, and he sees Levi. Okay? Levi, although a disciple, is also a rocket scientist. Okay? Let me explain how. So Levi is sitting there, Jesus walks by, and he sees Jesus. And the Bible just gives us something very short. He just says, Levi sees him, puts down his stuff, gets up, and walks out. And then later, he throws him a big banquet. It's really like the account that we have of Levi, who is also Matthew, the disciple. Levi was much like a rocket scientist. Levi was sitting in his office, but he was unsatisfied with his office. He was unsatisfied with his work, with what he was doing, with his environment. The Bible doesn't tell us this, but I'm speculating this because in order for somebody to get up, leave your work, dump all your work on your coworkers, lose your position, your reputation, and to become a social outcast, you got to be pretty unhappy with where you are. I've never met a person who says, I love my job, I love my family, I love my people, I'm leaving it. I've yet to meet that person. If you have met that person, I'd like to meet them. But I haven't met them. Nobody who loves their surroundings, loves their environment, is willing to just get up, throw it all away, be a social outcast, all these things, and leave. So this is why I'm speculating that Matthew was extremely unhappy with his current life. And what he was looking for was a picture of something different. What he was looking for was a picture of something different. Just like our scientists, they're on Earth, but what they're looking for is something greater and something bigger. And they look to space, and they say, that's where I want to go. And that's why they put all the work into designing rockets. And Levi, much in the same way, he was looking for something greater. He was looking for something better. And when Jesus walked up, and I'm sure that Levi had heard about Jesus, but when Jesus walked up, Levi said, that's what I want to be. That's the image that I've been looking for. That's the picture of who I want to become like. So what happened was that now Levi is in this state, a state of complete dissatisfaction with where he is. And now for the first time he has a picture of what he wants to be like. And see, this separation, okay, of where we are in life and where we want to be is the fuel to get us there. Okay? This is where desire comes from. This is where envisioning something greater for your life comes from, because you see where you are and you're unhappy with it. You see what you could be. You see what you could be, and you begin to say, that's what I want to be. And the difference is where we find the energy to overcome the forces that want to keep us where we are. Levi had forces that wanted to keep him in the tax office. He had other tax people who he was working with. He had a reputation. He had money. He had social position. Those were forces. Those were his gravity. Those were his ozone. Those were the things he had to overcome. But when he saw the picture of what he wanted to be, he said, I'm going to keep my eyes on the picture. I'm going to keep my eyes on the prize. And I'm going to overcome. Well, exactly how did Levi plan to overcome? Because, like I was saying, the rocket scientists, well, they plan for months. They calculate for months. They do tests for months. How did that was their planning. How did Levi plan to succeed? Because if we don't have a plan, if we don't make a plan to institute change into our lives, then we will always live where we don't want to be. And we will always be jealous of what we could be. We will always be envious of what we could be. And when somebody walks around and they have what we kind of want to be, we become jealous of them. But if we don't institute a plan, we are guaranteed to stay where we don't want to be. So what was Levi's plan? Well, Levi saw the picture of who he wanted to be like, who he wanted to follow. And Levi kept that picture right here in front of his face. He kept the picture of Christ right in front of his face by deciding to follow. He physically left, he changed his environment, and he followed. And every day he saw, as he followed, he saw what Jesus did. He saw how Jesus interacted with people. He saw how Jesus healed people. He saw how Jesus loved people. And he kept that picture in front of his face and said, this is who I want to follow. This is who I want to become. And he changed his environment. Today's gospel also talks about taking old fabric and putting it, or new fabric and putting it on old fabric. It doesn't match. When you take a new piece of fabric, sew it to an old piece, it doesn't match. When you wash it, the old fabric has already shrunk. The new fabric is still in the process of shrinking. What happens is that it tears the old fabric. It doesn't work. There needs to be a change. There needs to be newness. Same thing as the gospel is talking about the wineskins. It was saying that you can't take new wine and put it into old wineskins because of, and I read about this, Google didn't help me out with this, but like the fermentation process causes the old wineskins to burst. So you can't take something new and put it in something old. Levi could not have stayed in the office, continued to do what he did, and expected to become who he wanted to be like. So he made a plan. His plan included sacrificing some of his things, sacrificing his position, sacrificing the response to criticism, sacrificing some finances. Took sacrifice to get out of the situation. How did he continue to overcome the opposing forces that wanted to drag him back? Well, he kept the picture of who he wanted to be, his endpoint, his goal. He kept him in front of me. He kept the picture of Christ in front of him by walking with him. So now the question for us with today's message is, what picture do you have for your life? What picture do you look at? What picture do you desire? It could be a picture for a better marriage. It could be a picture of a better relationship with your kids. It could be a picture of better financial stewardship and responsibility. It could be a picture of academic excellence. It could be a picture of service. Everybody here is unhappy, myself included, with certain things about where they are. But we need to be able to look and find a picture of what we want to be. And then we need to plan to account for the forces, realizing that we will never become what we could be and should be without envisioning it, clarifying the picture, and making plans to overcome the forces that want to keep us where we are. Without making a plan to overcome the forces that want to keep us where we are. Some of us may be in situations where our friends are not the best of influences. Not just young kids in school, adults as well. Nobody's exempt from this. Maybe we're in environments where we don't have the best of influences. And we want to stand up. Well, we need to find a picture of what standing up for truth looks like. And we need to understand it. We need to have what it looks like to stand up for truth and for righteousness. When we clarify that picture, then we have the plan, the energy to do what we need to do. Just like a rocket, we plan for the energy that it needs in order to break free from all the forces. Easy? No. Impossible? Not with God. But also not when we put our effort into it. Not when we put our effort into it. And the last thing that we get a warning about in the gospel is that although we may have a vision for what our life could be and should be, sometimes when we get there, or we make steps to get there, it doesn't really seem like it's cracked out to what it should be. Maybe we may be a little bit disappointed, I thought this is really where I wanted to be. I thought this was the picture I wanted. The gospel tells us one last thing. It says, be patient. And it says be patient in the very last verse of the gospel, which says, and no one having drunk old wine immediately desires new, for he says the old is better. It's common that older wine tastes better because we're comfortable with it. New wine tastes a little bit different. If we are moving from a place of unhappiness, and we've been there for a while, we've gotten comfortable in that place. And when we move to a new place, when we see a greater vision for our lives and we get there, it's new. It's different. We have to get used to it. So immediately, we may want to fall back into old behaviors. It's easy to fall back into old behaviors. But when we set the plan, keep the vision in front of us, understand the sacrifices, the pulls that we will face while making change, we also need to say that when I get there, I need to give myself time to get used to this new life. I need to get used to tasting new wine. I need to get used to what, living with these certain sacrifices that I have to make in order to get to the place that I want to be. I have to get used to what living with those sacrifices are. And then over time, it feels right. Then over time, we see the fruit. And so, to summarize, everybody here would like to see change somewhere in your life. Identify where you want to see change. Identify where you want to see change. Clarify in your mind a picture of what that change looks like. Then begin to account for the opposing forces, which may come from family, which may come from friends, which may come from your job, which may come from school, which may come from finances. Account for opposing forces. And know you will spend a lot of energy breaking free initially. It gets easier afterwards. Once the spaceship breaks the ozone and is in space, the forces are not absent, but they're much, much less. But we use a lot of our energy in making change at the very beginning of any process that we undertake and go in. We use the most energy at the very beginning because nobody around us likes change. And when we decide to change our lives, people want us to stay the same because that's how they have gotten used to us. So they will try and make us stay the same. But when we account for those forces and understand that in the very beginning steps of making change in life, it will be difficult, it will be hard, and if I can identify where I know I will find these problems, then I have provided myself with the tools to break through the ozone and eventually get to the vision that I see for my life. We need to see what we can be. We need to believe that this is what we should be. Then over time, we will know that this is what I will be, by God's grace. And glory be to God forever. Amen.